and when he does.
No doubt.
And they're more difficult to beat. If they weren't more difficult to beat, the Clippers would have beaten them and they'd be facing the Clippers instead. Like, when I look at this team, I always think the same thing in the playoffs. Who has 2 MVP caliber players?
Yeah.
You need 2. MVP, not 4-star players, not all-stars. 5-star players.
Yeah.
That dude is an MVP, right? Now, I looked at this team, this Nuggets team. I liked them. But I thought in the future. I look at Jokic going into this series. He's a 4.5-star player. I looked at Jamal Murray. He's a 4-star player. I looked at Porter Jr. That's a 3.5-star player. They're all going in the right direction, but that's not enough. But my man, in these playoffs, Jokic is a 5-star player. Jamal Murray is a 5-star player. They got 2 MVP caliber players on this team right now, and the Lakers have no soft touch here in the conference finals.
Oh, not even close. And let's not mention if a 6'10" Michael Porter Jr. get going. Like, listen, this is not a favorable matchup for most teams in the NBA. As much as people wanted to see the Clippers and the Lakers and the cachet of that game, the names, the star-studded, let's not kid ourselves. We'd have been more excited. But from a basketball matchup standpoint, the Nuggets are a better matchup against the Lakers than the Clippers were.
Now,
go ahead.
Swagoo, I got you. I got 5 more minutes with you, and you're fonted as an ESPN NFL analyst. But just you can talk about anything. Obviously, I want to talk to you about something because I know you and me are going to go at it because we've already been at it on First Take about this. I thought it was smart for Bruce Arians to call out Tom Brady, and the fact that it has been reported that Montrezl Harrell and Paul George were getting into it, and that the team didn't have chemistry all year. By the way, that's not a secret that the Clippers didn't really have chemistry. And there's been a lot of criticism about this team that they I hate the word prioritized, but it's useful here. That their priority throughout the season was load management and this and that, and just get ready for the playoffs as though the regular season doesn't matter. First, let me say very clearly for everyone listening, the regular season does not matter in the NBA. It is only significant insofar as it prepares the teams the good teams. If you don't make the playoffs in the NBA, give me a break. There's 16 slots out of 30. You have a better than 50-50 chance of making it. Tells you how sorry the Knicks have been. Anyway, regular season's just about getting yourself ready for the playoffs. Now, you may say that, well, look, the load management and everything, you overdid it in the regular season and thought you could, and that was a mistake. You needed to care a little less about load management, a little bit more about chemistry. You have to kind of calibrate that better if you're the Clippers. But I'm not trying to hear, they thought the regular season didn't matter and they could turn it on. No. The regular season doesn't matter. But no, you can't just turn it on. The whole point of the regular season is getting yourself ready for the real season, the only season that matters in the NBA. Doesn't mean I don't like watching regular season games. I do. It's great. NBA is great. But any decent team is going to make the playoffs. Any team you really got to be paying attention to, they're in the playoffs when the season starts. So what about the Phoenix Suns? Yes, in a weird kind of year, the Phoenix Suns go undefeated in the bubble and yet fail to make the playoffs. But next year, if Devin Booker, if his improvement is real, which there's no reason to think it's not given his age and talent and skills and motivation, then and DeAndre Ayton can continue to be a not just useful, but an ascending big, then there's no reason to think the Suns won't be in the playoffs next year. And don't take what I'm saying too literally. There is such a thing as an interesting team that doesn't make the playoffs in like a very deep Western Conference, but not a team that was going to be able to win a championship or anything like that. Anyway, the point about the Clippers is this. The chemistry issues and everything is not what I'm primarily concerned about with this team. The issue is they mortgaged their entire future to get Paul George to play Robin to Kawhi Leonard's Batman. By the way, Kawhi Leonard's been Batman throughout his career. Even before he was a franchise player, he's played big in the biggest moments. Not in Game 7. That was a big choke job. Even clutch players sometimes choke. And in that case, is it a choke or is it just like a guy really underperformed? when he needed to perform, but there have been many, many times where Kawhi Leonard has exceeded what you could even reasonably expect from a superstar in a clutch moment. Nevertheless, okay, fine, he choked in Game 7. Now, without the assets, well, first let me say, all the assets are gone, really, the draft picks and everything, in order to bring Paul George in. And Paul George is not a good enough Robin to Kawhi's Batman to get this team a championship. And he never has been when it matters most. Paul George is a regular season star. And in the playoffs, he's useful because his skills are so varied. You know, like on offense and defense, he can kind of do everything you want him to do. But he plays worse than his best self under pressure consistently. So what that means is Kawhi plus Paul George, you need a third guy who's an all-star caliber player, and under pressure is Kawhi's real ace, you know, is Kawhi's real crime partner. And then Paul George becomes a jack of all trades because that's what he's been. And that's all you can reasonably expect. If he exceeds that, good for him. But what you can expect when you're making a team based on Paul George's whole history is anything we get under pressure from him is gravy. First 82, he's really useful. Once the playoffs start, we get extra like star play from him. That's gravy. Otherwise, he's kind of a Swiss Army knife player who can switch and defend and hit a three and do some things we need him to do. But we can't rely on that. So who do the Clippers have to go out and get? Like, do you trade Paul George? I don't think you can get another guy who's like Paul George's level, but then is good under pressure for Paul George because you think the rest of the league doesn't also know what Paul George is? So, or has been. I'm not saying he's like doomed to be that forever, but that's what you can reasonably expect at this point in his career if past his prologue. So, what do you do if you're the Clippers without the draft picks, without trading Paul George? What do you do? I think the answer is you have to target the kind of player I just mentioned, a guy who can attack off the dribble. The other thing about the Clippers' offense is it really runs through Kawhi. Like Patrick Beverley is the nominal point guard, but he's not exactly like a create an offense point guard. He's a 3-and-D guy playing point guard because he's short. And he can and he can handle. But he's not a star kind of playmaker. So you have to get someone like that who can attack off the dribble, who can create for his teammates, who plays big under pressure. And doesn't even have to be the second best player on the team. It could be Kawhi, Paul George, and then this guy. But under pressure, he'll become the second best likely player on the team. So who is that? That's Drew Holiday. Maybe it's Mike Conley, although not the way he played this last year. Maybe it's, you know, I don't think they'll be able to get LeVert, but like Dinwiddie, right? Maybe it's someone like that who's out there, who the Clippers can target for some kind of package involving some or all of like Montrezl Harrell, who was completely overmatched, and that's not even his fault. Jokic is a superstar, and he abused Montrezl Harrell in this series. But Harrell's a good player. Montrezl Harrell, Patrick Beverley, who's a winning kind of player, a defensive guy, a guy who can hit a shot for you. Lou Williams, who's a great sixth man, but you can probably approximate some of what he does pretty cheaply and like without having to really use an asset to pick it up. Right? You'd like to hold on to Zubac, so you need a legitimate big, and he is one. But that's what the Clippers are going to have to do, I think. I don't think in their current form it's a championship team based on what I just saw. 888-SAY-ESPN. I'm going to get to some calls, guys. Chris, or whoever's doing this, load up the calls. I'm going to get to calls today. I know I threaten this every day. 729-3776. But, Raj, I won't get to them if I don't see them up in front of me because I'm flying blind.
All right, you really want to take calls?
So as soon as they're up, put them up. I'm going to take some.
All right.
We got Tim Legler coming up in a little while, NBA analyst, of course.
We have sound from him. He's not a guest. You have Marcus Spears coming in.
We have Marcus Spears coming up in a little while. That was highlighted. We're going to listen to something Tim Legler said. I was going to say, you booked 2 guests in the first segment.
That'd be a lot of work. You're crazy. I ain't booking 2 guests in the show barely.
All right, good. Marcus is here already? Marcus is there? All right, so let's stop messing around. Let me talk to Marcus Spears, then I'll take some calls. Swagoo, what's up?
What's up, brother? Chillin', man. Chillin'.
This is, by the way, in case you're interested, this is Straight Talk wireless, everything for less only at Walmart. And you're on the, you join us, Marcus, and if you weren't aware, on the Shell Pennzoil Performance line. What do you think of that? Impressive, isn't it? Now, Marcus, let's start. Listen, you played Division I college ball. You were you played basketball at a very high level. And anyway, you have lots of opinions about lots of things, including sports.
Yeah.
So let's start with the NBA before we get to any NFL.
Okay.
The Clippers. Can this team, as presently constructed, win a championship, or do they have to do something?
No, they got to make a move. They got to make a move, man. They got to make a move for I honestly believe they need a true point guard, a facilitator to take Paul and Kawhi off the ball, and a bigger presence. Look, I love Montrez. I think he's a hell of a player, but you see the size catches up with him, man. I mean, it is what it is. A skilled big man like Jokic can take advantage of Montrezl Harrell.
And Montrez is a rim defender for his size, but that doesn't make you a real rim defender. And he can't shoot. You know, like in the modern NBA, if you can't stretch the floor for a useful power forward, but that's it. He's a useful power forward. To tell you the truth, I'd rather have